There are two things that are inevitable in life. One, death, another, change. If naturally it happens, I would say if you're intelligent, accept it. If you're stupid, suffer with it and enjoy the suffering.
Here in The Cut, we challenge our guests to finish a tub of ice cream before the end of the conversation. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. We are here on the Cool Table. My name is Adriel Smiley, a.k.a. AdrielSmiley.com, a.k.a. Adriel Smiley Official, a.k.a. The Godfather. Now, in The Cut, we challenge our guests to finish a tub of ice cream before the end of the conversation. We have a special guest here joining us for the first time, and we've waited, I would say, it feels like almost a decade for a new project, and it's finally here. Welcome to the show, Matthew Progress.
Hey, hello. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. I will not be finishing this tub of ice cream. Just tell you right now. Roast me in the comments. Go ahead.
Is strawberry cheesecake your actual favorite flavor, or that's just what you chose from the...
I like the real thing. Like, strawberry cheesecake is good. I've never had it in ice cream form, so I was like, why
might
not?
As well. Yeah,
it's like nice and melty right now. I like it too, so I'll try.
Are we going to say consensus strawberry cheesecake is the best cheesecake? Because I'm like, it's between, honestly, cherry and strawberry probably is the top two as the most common. But what are we saying is that the consensus best?
I feel like based on nostalgia, cherry takes it.
That's crazy.
And it like, this is gonna sound terrible, but it's like the canned cherries.
Oh, the real,
like this is what your mom used to make when you were a kid.
That's what you think when you think of cheesecake. Yeah, that's the first one that comes to mind. Because I'm like, Christmas is coming, so I'm just like, we have to like decide, because what usually happens, at least in my family's Thanksgiving or Christmas, you get like a few cheesecakes. And it's like, it's nice. Like there's a chocolate, there's a this, there's a that. And that's like, listen, my stomach ain't built to have a little bit of everything. So it's like, we got to choose.
Definitely. Yeah, I think I'm like a pumpkin pie man.
Oh, really? Or cheesecake?
I do love cheesecake though. I mean, I'm not a huge dessert person. So.
Pumpkin pie, yeah. I recently, pumpkin pie is new for me. I used to I'm like, you know when you eat with your eyes and you're like, that don't look right to me. That was pumpkin pie for me, and then I tried it and I kind of and I was like, okay, it's actually So pumpkin pie is now like, it's up there. Like it's getting in the first batch, not seconds,
right?
But in the first group, do pumpkin pie.
Now, if you had a black cake ice cream flavor, then forget it.
Don't even.
Forget it.
We're getting the podcast right now. Black cake is a reason for the season.
Right.
I'm telling you. Yeah, like, so funny story about black cake. So, some people call it rum cake.
Right.
And I used to work at a TV station, and a bunch of white people there, they had no idea about this.
Right.
So I bring it in and I'm calling it rum cake, and they're thinking that it's like edibles.
Right.
And so they're afraid to eat it at work, like they're going to actually get drunk. And I'm eating, like, I'm like, yeah, you guys sure you don't want it?
Right.
And so they're thinking I'm drunk running around, and I'm like, nah, this is just...
Right.
Yeah, so that's another example of white people not getting it, but...
Another episode of racial juxtaposition.
No, literally.
Right.
I want to start at the beginning, because I haven't heard you talk about as much of like your real entry into writing, into hip hop. You talked about, you starting as like, grade 9-ish, grade 8-ish, and like actually like writing before people heard you. But I want to talk about before that, because there is like a little moment when it's like, you're just a listener. You're not stepping in the field yet. You're still a fan. Who were you a fan of at that time? Was there a certain artist who like, you were like, okay, I want to be like them? Where was your fandom before you stepped into the arena?
Great question. I think the interesting thing is how far do you take it back with that question? I think my fandom started probably as a very young child. Both of my parents were huge music fans. My mom was a gigantic music fan. She had vinyl, tapes.
The whole thing.
So, it starts with me dancing around to Bad and Thriller.
Was your mom a hip hop fan, or were your parents more like pre-hip hop?
Yeah, my dad is like a reggae dancehall. My mom is into She like reggae and dancehall too, but she's into like 80s club music.
Okay, disco era.
Yeah, like stuff like Tears for Fears, Talking Heads,
sense. Yeah.
Michael Jackson, Soul to Soul.
Okay,
You know.
I see.
So yeah, huge fan of all that, and I think music videos are a big thing.
Yep.
So anything that was popular on Much Music really got me into it too. And this is like
the actual music video.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is like Much Music heyday. So, you know, this is when you had like Rap City and yeah, like early days Much Music. So I wouldn't really point to any one artist, but it was definitely like media and pop culture in general got me excited when I was very young.
And there's this teacher in grade 8 that you talk about that like really gave you your confidence. I'm gonna give you the ISO right here to show them some love. Cause I know that like at an early age, that is huge. And this is, I guess, is before you started really rapping. So this is like,
yeah,
you know, talk about that, you know, teacher giving you that confidence and what that meant to you.
You're nard-wiring me already. Right? Didn't expect it so quick. Yeah, I think the teacher you're referring to is Mrs. Adams. Her name was. She was my 8th grade teacher. Yeah, and I think the greatest gift a teacher can give a child is self-determination. It really help to inflate your self-esteem and your courage, and which then can help you tap into what your vision might be or who you want to be. And she was just really great at that. She was an incredible motivator. And yeah, she just did a great job of helping me to believe in myself.
Yeah, that's huge. Like hearing you talk about how much that teacher meant to you and you remembering her even all this time later. Right. It's like we take those things for granted, that little like push or spark of confidence someone puts in you. And you know, I just wanted to give her a shout out because it's like she didn't teach you how to rap or nothing like that. You know what I mean? But still that helps.
But without her, maybe I wouldn't have.
No, exactly.
And yeah, she thank you for giving her that space.
Yeah.
She deserves it.
No, 100%. Yeah. Now, this is one thing that I found out while doing my research that I feel like we're not even talking about you in this part. We're going to talk about this as a whole because it's a time capsule. You write in your first little bars in a Wu-Tang chat room. First of all, like this is after the time when Wu-Tang is really at its peak. So that's already something. Yeah. That's like Wu-Tang Reddit now, you know, for the people who are on Wu-Tang Reddit. And then chat rooms, I know a lot of listeners don't even really know what that's about. So explain to the people who are unaware of what like the Wu-Tang chat room was like in those times.
I mean, I'm dating myself a bit, but this is super early internet. So yeah, this is like very late 90s, very early 2000s.
Yeah.
This is like internet heyday, like the early popularization of the internet.
Pre-Facebook.
Way pre-Facebook. Yeah, when it was just like a cool novelty, like after school in the library thing to do, to go like get on the internet. No one really had the internet at home. Some people did. And they had these things called chat rooms, which are basically, I guess chat rooms are the basis for kind of like social media. You know, they're the basis of like, let's all digitally meet up in one place and kind of communicate and post things that everyone else can see. But there would be chat rooms. I think they think about chat rooms like they would a conversation. So there'd be chat rooms that are based on certain things. And there was a Wu-Tang chat room that was on Lycos.
Yeah.
Lycos is like, I'm not even sure what, I guess it's just like there was like Hotmail, Lycos.
It was one of those.
Yeah.
It's crazy you mentioned Lycos because forgot that it even existed until you brought it back. But it's like, that's another era of when there was multiple like servers and chat rooms, like the AOL times, like a whole different time. And then as well, like to me, the chat rooms is what the comment section became. That's the comment section now.
Right.
But chat rooms felt smarter. Like, does that make any sense? Like we're like, when we were in chat rooms, it felt like an actual conversation happening, something building towards something. Yeah. The comment section now feels like...
Chat rooms were like, it's like a hybrid of the comment section and like Tetris. Like it's like fast paced.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like
yeah.
there's a movement to it.
Mm-hmm.
So to see what was said, like it's not really archived.
No,
right? Like,
you can't go back. Yeah,
you
yeah.
can scroll back, but that's not what it's about. It's about like what's
in the moment.
and you can see that that's the makings of like the anonymity of the internet.
Yeah.
That like if I post
Oh
something
my
in this
God,
chat
yeah.
room, like
Who cares?
in 10 minutes, it's gonna be way above where anyone's even looking. So
Oh my days, crazy times.
that's the beginning of like the shit posting and the 4chan and all these like that's really where it all started.
So what was going on in your head that made you feel like confident to put rhymes in the Wu-Tang? Because this is not a regular chat room. This is like a bars of bars chat room. Like if you're a fan of Wu-Tang, you know what I'm saying? Like you're into the real rap. So
Yeah.
clearly you felt confident to put your bars in there. So what was that about? Like, or just I guess he's weren't even thinking that deep.
Well, like I would say I didn't feel confident, and I think it speaks to how anonymous the internet was back then, right? That it wasn't your identity. Like, it was this place where I could
be someone else.
Yeah, you could be someone else, and it's a place where I could like test out my like my little secret hobby passion in front of people and see what they thought without having to show myself.
Damn. Did you get any feedback on that verse? Do you remember?
I remember like I remember there was one person who was really positive about it. And yeah, that stuck with me. So
man, that will always stick with me, honestly, in the history of the show, because we don't have anyone with an origin story like that, first of all, even though we've had some older artists on here. But as well, like when you think about someone starting rapping now, there's no version of that. Like some people are meeting playing video games. That's a new thing that happens. But nope, starting in a chat room, never, never even a thing. There's this thing that happens with singers, and it happens less with rappers because rappers are more poets than musicians. But with singers, usually when you start, you're mimicking a singer. You know, a lot of singers say, when I first started singing, I was copying Whitney, and it took me 2 years to sing like myself. Did you have someone like that when you started writing that was like someone that was your template of writing?
Yeah, I had multiple people like that. I think, and I've encouraged young MCs to lean into that reality, right? To find the person that that resonates with you the most, and learn their raps first. So for me, it was multiple people. This gentleman right here was a big one for me. Reasonable Doubt, the first Jay-Z album, really like learned it front to back. Nas, it's another big one. Guru from Gangstar, Big L, just I would say I started as a fan, and then it was mimicry, and then you kind of move into like giving birth to your own style.
So take us to the next stage. Like you're writing in your room, you're kind of fresh in your craft. I heard you said that you feel like you had your 10,000 hours before you even started showing people your music. Like, so you're going in, working hard. The stage of like showing people your music, maybe making it something you do full time, recording. How did you even navigate that, thing? Because you've been doing this for so long on your own. Where did you go to be like, okay, now I want to record something? Who do I reach out to? Like, how was that process?
Right. I mean, that's I think that's a pretty complex answer. It's there's a long narrative associated with that, but I think the way it first started with me is, I'm an obsessive Virgo, so I fell in love with hip hop.
Say no more.
Super early. And so I filled up multiple books with rhymes and practice in my room before anybody knew, for probably a couple years. And it was like a daily activity, studying music and writing. Writing, reciting, practicing, and keeping the whole thing secret. So that's probably from maybe 12 to 14, 15 almost. Probably, 12 to 15. And then, then I went to an art school.
Okay.
And there was some rappers at the school. Some were older than me. And there was a lot of time spent in the smoking area, like hanging out, chilling, whatever, at lunchtime, and freestyle circles. and one thing leads to another, and like, one day you reveal this talent that's like pretty polished already. And so it's
It had to be a crazy response.
yeah. Well, because it's so polished, right? And I think even like the affirmation of those moments is kind of what starts to build my confidence to continue doing it. And if I had shared it earlier than that, I might not have felt confident to continue.
That's true, because you kind of came in nice. Like I like think about that on my friends who rap, and it's like, where were you hiding this? Like, I hang with you all the time. Where were you hiding this? And then you being nice right away. Yeah. That had to be like a jump scare almost for your friends, being like, you're basically better than me. Like,
yeah, it's interesting. I think it was a different time too. I think now we live in this time where being interested in a thing is enough to add it to your title on your Instagram bio.
Facts.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
facts. Whether you put in time in or not.
Yeah, simply being interested in a thing is enough to associate that thing with your name. I don't come from that era, and when people do that, they're doing it with a sacred art that a lot of people have given their life to, so whether it's rap or the photography or DJing or whatever have you, visual art. I would say the price of entry is some time studying and practicing.
You can't get in there without it.
You shouldn't be able to.
That's, I think, my biggest issue with the industry now is that it has like so much changed. Like when I was in high school, like I was hosting like ciphers after school. Like it was like, yo, come find Angel, we gonna rap. We gonna go in the front and rap. And it's like thinking about those dudes who used to come and rap for us like back in those days, how like polished they are now, how good they are now. And to think about like there's a group of people who like they didn't have to do that. That wasn't part of their, sharpening their sword.
Right.
And it's like, I don't want to downplay those people, but it's like, it's a whole different kind of part of the art to me.
Right.
Than when you actually have to.
Yeah, and it's not to say there's not prodigies and virtuosos and people who are naturally good at something.
Yeah.
That happens, but it usually doesn't happen.
No, you got to put the time in.
And it's this weird time now where I feel like there's more artists than there are fans. And
crazy.
Your shows and the times when you kind of show your art to people, on the other side of you showing your work is a bunch of other artists kind of like digesting, and
which is
that's fine. It's just, I think,
is it fine though?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's part of the internet. Like everyone feels inclined to share something, and I think sadly it degrades the crafts.
Let's talk about this project because we got a lot of positive things to say.
Right.
First of all, I'm happy that you're putting like a full project out. It feels like we've been waiting a long time, and I'm not the only one who's happy to hear a full body of work from you. But there are some themes on here that I wonder, did the pandemic play a part in any of the themes on the project? What was the start of writing it? Because there are some things on here that I'm like, I feel like you would have been already feeling this way. But there are some things on here where I'm like, the pandemic definitely amplified this. Right. So when did you start writing this project, and what was the first song that you were like, all right, we got a full thing here?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that we've been reflecting on since this project started to come together. I always say that a medium is like a vehicle, whether it's music or film or whatever it is the vehicle, and the idea is the passenger. Right, and the passenger is the most important thing. And I gotta say that like the themes on this album kind of like presented itself over time. The majority of it was written before the pandemic, and it, as time went on, it just became more and more relevant to what was happening on the planet. So, I mean, there's rhymes on that album that were written in 2018.
Damn.
And there's stuff that was written in 2020 as well, but the vast majority of it was written before the pandemic. And, the themes that you'll find on this album are things that really drive my practice. you know, it's always in abstraction and surrealism, but I'm always interested in dystopia, kind of looking at the world through a science fiction lens, you know.
I want to talk about the abstraction and surrealism, but I want to know where this, like, what was the first song that you were like, okay, we got something here? Whether it was just a verse done or you finally finished a complete song, what was that first song that you were like, okay, this is going to become a bigger...
So we had, I think, 4 demos,
okay,
which are now 2 songs on the album.
Mm-hmm.
So the song Hadaway and the song Golden Lord.
Oh, okay.
They're both like 2-for-1s.
Yeah.
Those were 4 demos.
Okay.
And those were when I had those, I was like, okay, I have an EP.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see that.
That's how it started.
Yeah, I think the abstraction and surrealism is something that I think helps your message on this project. Because I know you said before, like, you felt like you were being too literal with your messages. Yeah. And it was like just too straight on. Was there something that you saw in your own music or your own art that made you realize that? Because I think for you to realize that was like eye-opening for me seeing you as an artist, because so many artists that I like, and I rock with your message. I like what you stand for. I like what you talk about. But it is almost too head-on, you know, where it's like the person who's going to feel preachy.
Right.
You know, and I talked to Dylan about this a couple episodes ago, and we're saying how, like, you know, we're musicians. So our ear isn't the casual fan's ear. And so we're hearing this as musicians and poets when the casual fan is 0 for 2. And when you have a message in your music, it's almost like you have to find a way for some people not to get it, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
For some people to get it. So was there a moment for you where you were like, okay, I got to switch things up? Because you did have messages before, but I think, you know, adding the abstract and surrealism clearly made a difference with this project to me.
Yeah, you know, there wasn't a moment artistically. I think it was more about maturity, right? It was about realizing that, like, I come from an activist tradition.
Yeah.
You know, I came up involved in activism in the quote unquote conscious community. And, you know, I learned from a lot of elders who came up in that tradition, and that's a huge part of me. But I think at a certain point in my maturity, I realized that life doesn't exist in binaries.
Yeah.
You know, there's great complexity in our experiences, and that's why abstraction is such a powerful tool for artists to use, because it captures the kind of fragmentation of existence, right?
Yeah.
It captures the complexity, the gray, you know? Nothing is black and white.
Nothing simple like that.
Yeah, and in my experience is multiverse, you know, like I'm many, many things in one. And I think when I found abstraction, it helped me embrace that as an artist.
Yeah, I think that is probably, to me, that's the key difference in, I think, where hip hop has developed. And I want to know your thoughts on this. Like, my examples are always Kendrick and Cole.
Sure.
I say, you know, Cole is, you know, preaching to a lot of people without making it sound preachy, and has these bits of kind of braggadocio that kind of make it sound similar to someone who's more on the trap rap side. And then Kendrick has these huge themes,
right?
That whether you're, you know, whether you want to understand it or not, the theme is hitting you on the head.
Right.
And the song that I think of is Swimming Pools, you know, like that being his first hit single and being about alcoholism. And you have I forget what song it's from, but you have the part on the album where you're like, they're telling us to go outside. They're asking us to go outside. I wanted to know about that. Who, first of all, tell us who they is, and you know, why you have that on there of like, they're asking us to go outside. They're telling us to go outside.
Well, I think they is a revolving door, right? They is ultimately whoever you want it to be. I think you populate that template as the listener.
Yeah.
For me, they on this album, and for me in general, is often Big Brother, you know? It's the powers that be.
Yeah.
Not to say that they're one entity, but there's a lot of collusion, I would say.
As a collective, we'll say.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the record you're talking about is Doc Neville, which is named after Dr. Neville, who's Will Smith's character in I Am Legend. And the hook for that song was written actually just before the pandemic, but I was already kind of like living a pandemic lifestyle at that point. I'm big into fitness, you know, so I had a calisthenics routine at the time, and I had recently
locked in.
Yeah, I recently discovered the power of apple cider vinegar, and so
you were
that's where that hook comes from, and yeah, the idea of the refrain in the hook is when they tell me to be more social, I bet I won't, you know, and what I meant when I wrote it was that when people see me after I've been like recluse for a while and they tell me like to come back outside more often, I'll be like, yeah, of course. And then I'm not going to. That's what I initially meant. But after the pandemic, the true meaning that emerged is when you force people to stay inside for a certain amount of time, they're going to forget how to go outside.
Facts.
You know, so that's what it eventually meant.
The foresight in that was when I told you, like, thinking about the pandemic and how you already thought, that's like the foresight of that, I think is huge because, you know, it applies even more now than it did before. So
and that's the thing, you know, like I'm a deeply spiritual person, and I believe that ideas, you know, they're given from the ancestors, they're given from beyond. And there's a lot of themes and messages on this album that chose to manifest themselves. They just used me as a vessel, and Danny, who produced the album, as a vessel, you know.
You said this in an interview where you're like, we're resisting and we need to just be more open. I think that's extremely true. And I feel like, how do you feel we are with that now compared to, this is, I think, an interview maybe 2 years ago maybe, but how do you feel like we are with that now in terms of us resisting and not being open to, you know, our spirituality? Do you feel like that's still a huge issue, or you feel better about that in general?
I don't remember what context I said that in, like resisting.
Like someone not being open to their own spiritual growth.
Oh, right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an individual question. I think or to answer it collectively, I think we're in a very unique spiritual moment collectively. I think where there's a paradigm shift happening. There's, you know, it's part of the reason why there's a mental health crisis right now, why people are in a kind of different place than you've seen them in ever before.
Yeah.
Excuse me, the energy outside is all over the place. I think people are going through like emotional roller coasters, a lot of mania, a lot of joy, a lot of sadness. It's like there's this plate shift happening. So I think that opens a door for any and everything spiritually.
Facts.
You know, it really depends where you're at. I think you really need to be focused on self-care right now. You know? You need to have a meditation ritual. You gotta be putting your body through a physical ritual. There has to be fitness. Like, there's no excuse to not be in some type of. You gotta be looking at what you eat. You gotta be figuring out who you let in your life. Like, these things are more important than art. You know.
Yeah, we'll get back. That's kind of, we'll address that more in the top 5 section. But you're absolutely right. Like those people are very important. I want to ask you about meditating, because I would say I'm a fairly new meditator. Over the pandemic is when I got into it. You know, I had an ex who, you know, caused a lot of damage, but brought in the meditation. So we'll say it's a net positive.
Sure.
Talk about that and why you think that's important, because, you know, I said this on a last pod, is that I think meditation scares a lot of people. And for me, I suggest fitness as like your gateway drug into meditation, because you have to be present to really get into fitness. You can't be thinking about whatever else is going on in the middle of your workout. And so people who are scared of meditation, get your fitness right, and you'll be way better at being present. Maybe feel more comfortable with meditation.
Absolutely.
Talk about this, why meditation is important, because I agree with you, but I think that there still is a stigma for a lot of people around meditation.
Yeah, there really is a stigma. It's a scary word for a lot of people. I think that meditation is up for your interpretation. You know, it is what you make it. For me, I'm not a fan of any doctrine. You know, I'm against doctrine of any type. And so No one can tell you how to meditate. Don't worry about other people's meditation rituals. There aren't any rules. It's about trying to find your most kind of quiet, tuned in self inside. And I encourage people to create their own ritual. That's what I've done. You know, I did that years ago and I still follow that ritual. And it consists of a whole bunch of different influences that came from a lot of different traditions that I pulled from. And, you know, just like I don't believe in doctrine when it comes to the spirit realm or a higher power, I think the idea that another human being could be the intermediary between you and the higher power is ridiculous.
I hate that shit.
You know,
I hate that.
So
shit.
whether it's a priest or an imam or you name it, it's not for me.
I hate that shit.
I think it's an illusion. You know,
I'm happy we're aligned. I love to hear it. One thing you mentioned is like there's no one way to do it. That has been the biggest thing I see with some people, because I think the one person they know in their life who meditates, they want to do it like that person.
Right.
And it's like, no, you got to find your way to do it. The person who taught me how to meditate, I don't meditate like them.
Right.
You know, and so that's a huge part of it.
Just like the hip hop thing we were talking about, right? Like maybe you copy someone at first, but you got to find your voice.
You have this section on human. And I this is probably one of my favorite parts of this song. It was one of my favorite songs on here because this is a section that I think is for the like casual listener. You know, like they're not really into lyrics as much, but they'll catch this part. And in the last verse, you said, the clash is gender, the clash is racial, white with box braids, black with cake soap. The most chat got half the say so. You coming at my gates, I'm gonna clap your face though. And then you go on and talk about latex, stitches, staples, N95 mask, WHO. To talk about that section and that verse, because I feel like you say it a lot just in that little space.
Yeah, I think, you know, that little part was actually the last thing written on the whole album.
Oh, wow.
So it's one of the few things written after the pandemic. The night I recorded that was the night before the first lockdown was announced.
That's a crazy time.
Right. So we knew about COVID, we knew about Wuhan and all that, and people were expecting something to happen. And that fueled a lot of that writing. Yeah, I mean, like a lot of what I write and a lot of the bars, it's a lot of layered meaning. So there's not one kind of explanation for where I'm going with that verse. I think it's like kind of like a more frantic, high energy version of the song that came before it. Like it's the end of the song. White with box braids, black with cake soap. I think that is a clear meaning there. Yeah. This idea of trying to sort of change the body in order to change the origin, or like trying to change the skin to change the blood. Yeah. You know, which is an impossibility. And yeah, for me, I resent the idea that you can't be a pacifist and a humanist and still believe in necessary violence. That's who I am, you know. I don't want to see people get hurt. I'll choose for people not to get hurt. But if the issue gets pressed and it's the safety of myself and my family, then murder was the case. You know what I'm saying? Like,
like 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah. And those things to me can all exist in one place.
And they should be able to. And I think this is what I see so much now, which, you know, bothers me, is the idea of two things to be true. It's like, that's such a simple concept that should be, you know, easy for people, but you know, it's like when you think yourself two things can't be true, you kind of block yourself from understanding more things.
Absolutely.
So that's an example right there that I feel like, again, in those bars, it's pretty clear, and you don't have to be a deep thinker or understand everything to get that. Now, this, you know, I'm saying I learned this from you before we even met, and I put this movie into my list, The Holy Mountain. Talk about that, because you have a lot of love for that movie. And we like to give, recommendations here on the show
Word.
for other media for people to enjoy. So you already sold me. It's on my list now. This is your chance to sell everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, it's something I've spoken to death. It's one of the core books of my Bible. Alejandro Jodorowsky's surrealist South American director. And yeah, I mean, the film it's better watched than explained. And it is, it's about everything, it's about everything. I don't want to be that person, but I truly think if you're interested, you should just go check it out. It gets screened sometime. It recently got screened a month ago at the Fox Theater in the Beaches. I went to go see it again. It's been a huge, it blew me away when I first saw it. And speaking about abstraction and surrealism, it's a masterwork of surrealism that basically tells the story of the planet and it's a wild ride, and it's, some of the boldest, most dynamic, abstract filmmaking that's ever existed. I realize I'm not really saying much about it right now, but when you watch it, you'll see why it's hard to explain.
You did a good job of hyping it up without saying what it's about.
Right. So I wish I could explain more, but it's like you can't go into one part without like
ruining the movie kind of.
Yeah. I would also say in terms of form, it's like a bunch of vignettes that all relate back to the same thing.
Okay.
So
I think you've done a good job, man. Like there's a person who like they want to read the bio for the movie before they watch it. You can still do that, okay?
Yeah.
He didn't leave you hopeless. He gave you the hype. You can still read that bio.
Yes.
But I'm excited to watch this because the way you've spoken about this movie being life-changing, I'm excited to experience that.
Curious to see what you think about it. And like, take your politically correct hat off.
Yeah,
this was made in the 70s. Just allow it to exist in its form.
We ain't got to cancel nobody.
Right.
We ain't got to cancel nobody. Digital Underground. I think we got to talk about this track because this is the number one song on Spotify right now. I think how people listen to music, this is maybe the song people like are gonna run to for the project. First of all, the chorus, amazing.
Thank you.
But just the idea of sexual liberation. I think that this is again one of these words where we have a connotation of what we think that means when we hear that. What does that mean in terms of this song?
Well, I think the drive, like the motivating force behind the song is it's sexual liberation with a backdrop of dystopia.
Yes.
Right? Like as the world burns, I think as like with everything the way that it is in this planet and how grim everything feels, and how hopeless things can feel. It leaves you with very few options things that you can proactively explore that can give you a sense of freedom. And I think sexual exploration is it's a great way to tap into freedom. Just like fitness is, it's a way to get it. It's a way to blend the body and the spirit, in a way that's self-determined.
It's freeing.
Yeah.
And it's like kind of, I don't want to say it's an example, but you can kind of tell a lot about a person from how they feel sexually and what they feel comfortable with or not comfortable with, because there is a sense of like personal freedom you need to have, to get there. So
right.
I think that's like what I took from this is like, that's a huge part of it.
Absolutely.
And then you mentioned, where the world is right now. The one thing I really love is that like the world is basically burning down in front of our eyes. And I feel there's a group of us who are aware of that and kind of like moving accordingly in a sense. And, it's almost as a group that's like, maybe if the world was falling apart, I'd get in shape. Or, if the world was, it's like the world is extremely falling apart. So those things do apply. But I think that is something that people take for granted. I feel like even when you mentioned mental health earlier, like, your kind of sexual health and how sex affects your mental health is a huge part of that.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, yeah, even going back to what we were talking about before about like figuring out the complexity of life and sort of moving past the binaries and the doctrine into the gray, I think, you know, your sexual journey is a great personification of that, where like you have to figure out yourself on a certain level before you can truly feel liberated sexually.
You got to be comfortable in the gray.
Right. And that's why a lot of people, you know, come out later in life or they discover their fetishes later in life. And I think that kind of parallels their self-discovery in a lot of ways. Yeah, it's part of it.
It's like they rethink how they think about themselves.
Absolutely.
Once they have that. Us talking about sexual liberation, I watched the craziest movie last night. Chris, this is like a huge aside. This movie is called Dick Long is Lost, or Dick Long Got Murdered.
Dick Long got murdered. Okay.
So we just watched it as for the funny name.
Yeah.
And basically it's a dude and his friends have been having band practice for years, but band practice is them fooling around with each other and fooling around with a horse.
Oh, okay.
And basically one of the dudes gets killed by the horse.
Oh, wow.
And first of all, they don't know how to tell anyone because it's like, how can we tell?
Right.
This is how the dude died.
Right.
But
wow.
Yeah, crazy movie. And it just goes all the direction. You can imagine just the wife's expression of being like, are you even in a band?
Right. It sounds like a reference to, speaking of the early days of the internet, there's a famous video of
that's exactly what I thought
somebody
of too. Yeah,
getting killed by a horse in that way.
Yeah. And I'm like, isn't it crazy? Like where we're full circle, where it's like, and this is like a serious movie. Like it sounds like it's funny. It's a serious movie.
I love a weird premise like that. You know,
absolutely crazy. We're going right directly for things that you said. Okay, we don't like to misquote people on this show, so we talk about things that you said. Now you had this tweet that I feel like. Well, yeah, I don't. Once we mention tweets, it's like
I don't hold back on that platform.
Yeah, no, I'm only quoting part of the tweet.
Okay.
I'm only quoting part of the tweet, but I think this is a tweet that will, you know, divide us and see kind of people we are.
Okay.
You said, I have serious issues trusting people who always, that's always in caps, always follow rules, laws, and instructions. That type of autopilot obedience will get us all killed out here. What did you see that brought that to the Twitter timeline? You don't got to name names, of course, but what did you see that, you know, you're like...
That was recent, right?
Yeah, maybe last week, a couple weeks ago?
I don't remember that day. I think I was, a lot of times, like, I'll get I'll start, I intermittent fast every day, so I'll break my fast around like 2 or 3, and I'll go and have like a tea or like something, and I'll sit and reflect for a bit. That's when, a lot of times when tweets will happen. I think I was just reflecting on people and just watching things. So it wasn't any one person, but the essence of that tweet is that when you've witnessed for your whole life, when you've witnessed the people that are in control use human bodies as fuel and gasoline,
basically,
like, you know, you've felt no love, respect, or care from the people that control, the society that you live in. And that extends to the major entities of control in your life, whether that's the school system that you were raised in or the majority of the jobs that you've had, you know, and this isn't just like plain anti-authoritarianism. I would consider myself anti-authoritarian, but I think that also sometimes we need to have hierarchical relationships in life. It's also in nature. So I'm not just against it for the sake of being against it, but we live in a very violent world where people use positions to inflict violence.
And that last part, this autopilot obedience will get us all killed. That's a fact. Like how I always think of it, I used to work at Queen's Park for about a year during the pandemic.
Okay.
And of course, I saw a lot of things that this, you know, I already was just dubious of the government system, but so many things just seeing it up close, I was like, they really got us out here.
Right.
And, you know, that autopilot obedience you talk about, you know, it was during the pandemic is when I saw a lot of these things. So,
perfect example,
a perfect example is, you know, I forget her name now, but she was the youngest person in Canada to die from COVID at the time. I think she was 9 years old. And her father passed from COVID, and her mom was in the hospital. And basically, her dad got sick at work and couldn't take time off because they wouldn't allow it. And of course, they need to work. So the dad came home brought COVID home to the family. And basically, everyone was sick. And one of the MPs is basically in tears in the house, in tears, like saying, let's do something. People are dying. And, you know, of course, we know how that went.
Yeah.
And, you know, seeing things like that is like, not everyone's going to watch, you know, the House of Parliament channel to see this is happening. But there are people who will blindly, you know, follow the government when, you know, if you see something like that of, you know, people turning a blind eye to, you know, someone in tears, seeing children die, maybe you look at it a little differently. But you're right. When you say like this, you know, autopilot is going to get us all killed. Like that's what I think of, you know, that, you know, people, that person's still getting voted for. Understand any sense? Like the week before they denied the law that would change that, allow him to take time off. The next week, him and his daughter pass.
Right.
You know, and it's like, fast forward a month later, they get voted and win the election like it's nobody's business. So that's what when you said that, that's what I thought of, is like, yeah, there are people here who are dying on that hill, fighting for it, and it's kind of like, I can't trust them.
Whether it's MP or PM, the people only matter to the extent that they're valuable to the agenda.
That's it.
And the moment they're not, they don't matter.
Money and agenda is it.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, I think my brother and I have kind of always thought like this. And I think, you know, we didn't really think of the divide of like people thinking differently than us before. We kind of were in our own bubble. Then we think about that. Since the pandemic happened, I feel even more of an alertness of when people don't think that way. And it's like, how could you go through this whole pandemic and still feel like the government's on your side? Do you have any moments like that where you're like, I already thought this way before, so I came into this whole pandemic moving differently, but now that this whole thing has happened, y'all still think that he's a man and that kind of thing?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, for me, I think since high school, I've been pretty aggressive about sort of self-determined thought and like really, you know, living in the gray, sort of seeing, like, not just accepting anything as blind truth.
Yeah.
But I do think, like, I watched the pandemic, I hate the word, but I watched the pandemic radicalize a lot of people, whether it radicalized you about free thought, which hopefully it did, or it radicalized you about being an obedient sheep and like really, you know, working for the police force without working for the police force. You know? And it did that for a lot of people too. So
embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean, but this is
what it is, I guess.
Yeah, humans we're easily programmed. You know?
Yeah, and the worst part is that a lot of the quote unquote sheep feel as if they're the free thinkers, and that's kind of part of the issue. Is like,
right? You
know, imagine you're feeling like you're, you know, so smart, and you're just following the dude in front of you.
Absolutely.
And you know, that's where the big issue comes. You know, there's always going to be sheep, and now how me and my mom always say is like, if the sheep know they sheep, that's fine. You know.
Yeah, and I would also encourage you too that, like, look, man, like the sheep free thinker is another thing that's not a binary, right? Yeah. You and I are sheep in moments as well. Everybody's both. And I think what we need to strive to do is give each moment and situation our full attention and our full analysis. Yeah. So that we don't become sheep, you know?
Yeah, just being present in every situation and not just kind of going with the flow in the wrong way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Listen, we came here to talk about sheep, so I think it's a perfect time to talk about our exotic animals. Now, I don't make the rules, okay? When people get $100 million, they get an exotic animal. You saw Mike Tyson with his tiger,
right?
Michael Jackson with his monkey, Justin Bieber with his monkey,
right? Of course.
So when you get to that $100 million level, what's the animal that you're bringing into your life?
Wow. An animal that I'm bringing into my life. I think a pig.
Okay.
A pig, because they're very intelligent.
Yes.
And we don't treat them like that.
We do not.
You know, I'm a dog person. I love dogs. Especially smart dogs.
Yeah.
And pigs are way smarter than dogs. So I would love to have a relationship with the pig.
That's very...
Pause.
Matt's rocking with the feds.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I'll tell you this is like, so I don't eat pork, and I grew up not eating pork, and then I had a bit of time where I like, you know, I was like, oh, what's the worst that could happen?
Right.
You know, whatever. And I went to Jamaica, and one of my uncles had a bunch of pigs on his property. They weren't even his. It's just the way his property was, pigs around. And seeing those pigs in person just swore me off of swine.
You can feel the spirit, right?
I said, I'm good. Right. And what you said about how we treat them, 100% right. No one has mentioned that in this segment of like how we treat this certain animal they're going to choose, but we treat pigs like they're cockroaches, basically.
Right. And they're super intelligent.
Yeah. So listen, I'm pro that because I'm not a swine man. I'm cool. I'm cool without the bacon.
Right.
So if you keep the pig as a pet and just kick it,
it's not exotic though. Maybe I'd have to find like a wild hog from like
I feel like a pig has to be exotic. If you go in the Chinese grocery store and you see the parts of the pork that they're selling, might as well be exotic.
Okay,
so
cool.
I'm taking that one.
Cool.
You mentioned before about having the right people around you, and that's one thing I think is super important. I feel like when someone is successful, you can almost pinpoint the people in their life who are a part of that success, whether directly or indirectly. And they say the top 5 people in your life help make you who you are. So who are those people for you? Now, your top 5 could be a 2 or it could be a 10, but who are the people in your life who help you be you?
My mother, you know, you got to give it up to Mom Dukes.
Always.
I owe everything to her. My partner, who I love very much, she is a major supporter. Best friends, too many to name, but there's like 2 or 3 in particular that are really special to me. Myrna is one of them. My dad, and also my siblings. I have 3 siblings.
Can't forget that.
Majorly important to me. And also I'll say Dan Only, who produced this album. He's my primary creative partner. This guy, we make everything together. We made everything for this album, down to the artwork. So yeah, hugely important. Yeah, and just, you know, there's too many people to mention everybody, but there's more, you know.
Yeah, you and Dan on this have some kind of like Nas Hit Boy, like, you know, marriage. Like, I know you guys be working together, but I think that, you know, for your kind of coming back with this project, for y'all to do this together, I think that's what made it what it was, because I feel like there's a cohesiveness in the sonics of this project that is rare because the sounds are all over the place. You know, like there's not like every song is the same kind of hip hop. Like there's songs on here where half the song isn't even a hip hop song. Yeah. You know? And so it's like to have all of that and it still feels like it's a project, like that's pretty impressive.
Thank you. That means a lot. Yeah, we put a lot of time and effort and we tinkered with this thing a lot, man, over 3 years. And
damn,
I don't know if I'll ever make another LP. So
damn, that's how you're feeling.
It's a lot of work, man. It's a lot of work. I have high standards, and you know, for it to sound the way it does now and to be as eclectic and you know, I wanted it to be a journey, and it takes a long time to make it sound like that.
Sorry, we're not gonna speed past that. So, what made you feel like you might never make an LP again? I know you're not saying you're not gonna make music again,
right?
But what makes you think you might not make an LP again? I know it takes a lot of work. It's a lot that goes into it, but is there a specific thing about it that you're like, I might not do all of this over again?
It's that amount of work and care and labor in relation to the music industry.
Yeah,
right now, right?
Fair.
In relation to the way that pop culture works in this era, social media, and the fact that everybody's an artist.
Yeah.
People give an album that needs at least 2 weeks of your attention. They give it an hour, maybe.
Facts.
You know what I'm saying? The shelf life of the album is a week for everybody. People talk about an album for a week, you know.
Yo, that
It's just this project is it's 3 years of my life is not. It's just worth more than a week of your time, you know.
I was gonna say that is a thing to me that I always commend artists who like continue to put out music, and not even just musicians, but visual artists, actors, directors. Is like the way things are now. People decide on your art like that.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind to think of like this is something that like forget about the making of the music. Somebody talking about stuff that is like lifelong things you've been thinking about, lifelong things that you've been through. And in a second it's just like so yeah, I commend you guys for just continuing to do that, because that I think about with my stuff, it's like how long it took me to do the research, and you're only going to watch half the video. You know what I mean? Like,
and then on the other side, it's also like, is it fair to ask people for much of their time in this sea of content? This is information age, man. There's thousands of hours of things to digest every day. So,
is it fair is a real question. But I always go back to, there are enough of us who are old enough to be from the time where we sat with an album.
Right.
There's enough of us to be from the time where we loved our favorite artists putting out music. I always say it's like when you're putting out like a bunch of music over and over again, whoever's complaining is not a fan of you.
Right.
You're not.
Right.
No one complained when DMX put out 2 albums in the same year. If you're a DMX fan, you were like,
you went and got the albums,
please. So that's kind of the problem. Is that sometimes our supporters aren't as loud as the quote unquote haters or the contrarians. And it's like, how do we even sift through that, It's also a weird time where like we, in the days when I came up, when I was like a real young buck out here, there was only a few people were artists, and you tended in your core group of friends, maybe you and maybe a couple other people were artists. Facts.
Now everybody in your group of friends is an artist, right? Everybody's an artist, and everyone kind of like, everyone wants to support each other and supports each other, but it's not like groups of friends rallying around one artist anymore.
No,
it used to kind of be like that.
Those days are done. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but another thing too I realized, and this is a big Toronto thing, is like our industry is so big with other artists where it's almost like, this is obviously not true, but it feels like, where are the people to be a fan of the artist? It's like if you do a show, 70% of people at your show are in the music industry.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And like low key, they're just like taking notes or seeing like, oh, okay, you're doing that. All right, I'm gonna do this. Like,
and it's like, where's the real fandom? So I feel you with that. I honestly want, more full length projects from you.
Thank you.
I think that that art is not dead to me. I do another podcast called Album Mode. We review albums every week, and we're seeing so many artists who it's their second album, they're trying to blow up, and they knock it out the park and try a bunch of different sounds, or this artist has this one single we know, and we hear the album and it's different from that single but phenomenal. So I don't think that art is dead. I think there's something there, and I feel like the messages you have, the music that you make, that's full length album music. Like no one's gonna catch that in a single. You know what I mean?
I'm exaggerating, saying I'm not. I probably will. It's just I want to. I think it's important to share with people how it feels to put out an album like this in this era. And that like there's a huge imbalance in the energy that's used versus the acceptance of it.
And this too, it's been a long time for music, so people might believe you. Slumber was what, 6 years ago?
2018, 5 years ago.
5 years ago now. Yeah. So it's like, I could get it. I don't want to give no one a jump scare. You just, you just say that, and all of a sudden they're worried, because when your favorite artist is not putting out music, listen, my goat is D'Angelo.
Oh, yeah.
So
well,
trust me, I extremely understand. So
I'm definitely that, as far as like my output goes. It's definitely in the Frank, D'Angelo,
Maxwell,
etc. Yeah, that's Hopefully not Andre 3000, but
yeah,
as much as I love him,
fingers crossed for that. Let's take a look at the ice cream. You didn't get much done, but I'm sure it's
embarrassing, bro.
It's like a little soup in there.
Look, I took like maybe 3 or 4 bites.
Yeah, it's a little soup in there. A big shout out to Eva's. Eva's Original Chimneys on Bloor. They are our ice cream sponsor for all of season 3. So all my Toronto people, strawberry cheesecake, tiramisu, Reese's Pieces, they got all the flavors. So
Eva's is delicious. Yeah, it's very good.
Please reach out to Eva's. So we're gonna wrap this up with the Wednesday Wisdom. You've dropped a bunch of gems already, but we want to know what's a quote that either you remind yourself of or someone around you that, when someone's feeling down, this is what picks them up.
There are 2 things that are inevitable in life. One, death, another, change. If naturally it happens, I would say if you're intelligent, accept it. If you're stupid, suffer with it and enjoy the suffering. That's by Ma Anand Sheila.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, I think the idea of people running from change, oh my God, it hurts me. It hurts me. And here's how I framed it. I have a friend who, she went back to school this year. She's, I think, 28, 29, going back to school. And she's like, by the time I'm out of school, I'll be this old and that whole thing. And I said, you're, so scared of change because change is so foreign to you. And I use an example like, someone who's in their 50s, they've probably been through certain changes so many times that this change is now, instead of, a change for 3 years being 10% of your life,
right,
is now 2% of your life. And so the change feels smaller just arbitrarily.
Right.
But if someone who goes through change often, you're always trying to reinvent yourself, always improving, the idea of change seems less scary.
Definitely.
And I always tell her, I said, you have to kind of accept change because the person you want to be, you got to change. That's as simple as that.
Man. And I think leaning into that change reality, the change mindset, makes it so that your changes, if you resist change, it's good. Your changes are going to be like these like floodgate moments where you've been like overwhelmed. You build these dams, and then the power of change is going to break that dam at some point, and it's going to destroy you.
Yeah.
But if you accept it, then things flow. And
that's a good way to put it too. Yeah, I like that to end this podcast off because I feel like that's something that we all got to carry into the new year. I've been trying to tell everyone, listen, don't wait till January 3rd to get your resolutions together, to start journaling. You can start manifesting that right now. So
absolutely,
I'm trying to get everyone on that wave. We're paying it forward. Don't wait till January comes. Whatever you want to do, get on it now.
Well, hats off to you for creating a platform and a place where people can have these kind of conversations, and this helps people do exactly that.
No, I appreciate that. This is important, man. Something that I realized, I'd say maybe 15 years ago, that the older I got, I realized was more rare, is how people view themselves. Everything you become is how you view yourself. We
100%.
We talk a lot of garbage about someone like Kanye, and I said, Kanye is doing it because he believes he can do it. There's a clip that went around where he said, I'm going to be a billionaire, marry Kim Kardashian, and become the president. 2 of those 3 things have already happened. So you could just do the math on how he feels about himself. And it's like, what you think you are is what you become.
Right.
And if we could change how we think about ourselves, the sky is the limit no matter what you believe. So I hope that we can all start here, and this could be kind of a wake-up call for anyone listening. I think, last but not least, let's talk about the project. And if you had to give someone one song, we'll say not any of the singles, but you had to give someone one song to listen to dive in, what song would you say?
Ooh, that's really tough. I think I'll sidestep that question by saying Prologue, the first song, because you're meant to listen to the whole album. So go listen to the whole album.
That's the right answer. That's the right answer. Trick question. Pass with flying colors. If you made it to the end of this podcast, you know what to do. Leave us a rating and a review. 5 stars, not a single star less, of course. Find us on Instagram at The Cool Table Live, on YouTube at The Cool Table Live. You can listen to the radio show every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. That's CJTM Met Radio in Toronto, metradio.ca for anyone listening online. And of course, until next time, cancel canceling, bring back bullying, know yourself, know your worth.